Hello BookTube. The first tag I'm going to be doing today is my favorite fiction books tag. It was weaponized by Steve Donahue from my favorite fiction books video that Olive of a Book Olive did about a week ago. So Steve's weaponization, or his comp, says you have to have 10 books. The books have to be from the 21st century, so from 2000 on, and the books have to relate in some way to the previous list of the booktubers who've done the list already, or done the tag already. So I'm going to add a little something of my own to this tag too. I'm going to mention from the two lists that I've seen, Olive's and Steve's, books that I would like to read, or in one case, I really have got to get to. And then I will do my top 10 list. Although I do also have a few caveats. One, going through my read lists, since 2017, I've listed the books I've read. I've tried it off and on a few times over the years, and I kind of drop off, although this is the longest extent that I've been consistent with it. I've noticed my memory isn't quite what I used to be, which is kind of annoying. And also how utterly vicious I can be, and I'm getting, in my critical assessment. So that is something to be aware of. And also, I'm never entirely consistent. I mean, this list is provisional. It's will be changing. Next year, the list might be radically different, or it might stay the same. I don't know. So anyway, let's get down to the books I would like to read from both Steve and Olive. If the scroll function would work. Okay, so from Olive, also one will be shared with Steve. I would like to try The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer. It sounded quite interesting. And then from Olive, I would also like to try The Tsar of Love and Techno by Anthony Marra and The Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. And then from Steve, I would like to try Tigerman by Nick Harkaway. I've tried Angel Maker by Nick Harkaway a few years ago and hated it. But Tigerman's always sounded very interesting to me, so I do want to give that one a go. And maybe give Nomon and Angel Maker a go, or another go. Also, Percival Everett by Virgil Russell by Percival Everett. Sounds very interesting. I would like to try that one. The Lesser Bohemians by Eimear McBride, which I do have, and I have been meaning to get to for a while, but that I was planning on entering that book into one of my reading projects, which I don't know exactly how I should approach those reading projects. That might be my Monday video if nothing happens that disrupts it. But anyway. And Two Boys Kissing by David Levithan. I probably should give Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel a go, but I don't know. Probably should give that one a go. And my mom did not like The Tiger's Wife by Tia Obreht, so I don't know if I'm going to give that a go. So here are my top 10 lists from the 20th century. or 21st century. Two of them I don't have. I checked them out from the library, and I have yet to add them to my collection, although I really would. So the first one is A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. I read this a year or so after it first came out because it was up for some prize alongside More Than This by Patrick Ness. I want to say it had to have been some kind of SF or SF adjacent prize because I think it was covered in the science fiction press. There used to be for a long while a site called SF Signal that would collate science fiction, book news, and a lot of information. And it was my go-to site for a lot of science fiction related information. And it's since, I think about 4 or 5 years, it's been defunct. So a lot of what they did is harder to find now. Anyway, but I really enjoyed A Tale for the Time Being. And I would love to have another go at it. And then the second one is The Harder They Come by T.C. Boyle. I read this in 2017, early in the year, during a very rough patch, and I absolutely loved it. And I have struggled with T.C. Boyle's work. I've also tried Water Music, The Women, Welcome to Wellville, or The Road to Wellville, and a short story collection, and I really haven't gotten on with any of those others. Although I probably should give him another go, in addition to adding The Harder They Come to my own collection. But I think maybe it's also because The Harder They Come is rather different than T.C. Boyle's usual approach to the books. So, from the books I actually have, I love China Miéville's Perdido Street Station, which came out in 2000. It's a seminal work in the New Weird. It's about a rogue scientist who's trying to create a radically new form of energy and technology, and him being roped into the underworld of New Crobuzon that sees the city threatened by monsters that stalk dreams. And it is just absolutely, I love this book. Absolutely do. Next is Nine Fox Gambit by Yoon-Ha Lee. This is the first book in the Hexarchate series, or the Machineries of Empire series. It's about a young woman from her society's military caste who is somewhat heretical in some of her thinking, and this sort of avant-gardeness allows her to, or pretty much propels her to being sidled with one of the greatest villains this society has ever known, in order to root out a heresy taking root in a space station. And it's very exciting. The science is amazing. It's been described as very hard to understand, but I thought it was quite easy. And just the Hexarchate series, or Machineries of Empire series, they're a hoot. Definitely, highly recommend them. Next is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This is a comedy. It's like an epic fantasy with a heavy comedy bend that sort of, as its conceit, sees these wandering mercenaries who are hired to fight and kill monsters as rock stars, as rock bands. And there's a very sort of music-inspired sort of imagery and Easter eggs, or references. So it's really good. So in this book, the band, or the mercenary band Saga, have been broken up for decades. And one day, the daughter of Golden Gabe leaves to go fight in Castia to defend the city against a horde of monsters threatening the city. And so to rescue her, Golden Gabe brings the band back together, and they struggle to basically find the resources and eventually get to Castia and save the day. Very fun, blast. Highly recommend it. Also, The House of Binding Thorns by Elliot de Bodard. This is the second book in the Dominion of the Fallen series. I think this one is stronger than the first book in the series, The House of Shattered Wings. This novel focuses on House Hawthorne, in which former exile members and sort of periphery members of the house try to overthrow the charismatic, antagonistic Asmodeus, as Asmodeus seeks marriage alliance. And this book is a hoot. I absolutely love this book. Really need to give the Dominion of Fallen series a reread. Next is The City of Lost Fortunes by Brian Camp. This book is a contemporary fantasy set in New Orleans, in which the city has a rich sort of mythological demimonde, in which various gods inhabit the city. And in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the city is beset by all sorts of problems with the death of the luck god of the city. And so Luke, I think that, if I remember, that's the main character's name, he is hired to basically go to this poker game in which eventually the luck god is murdered, and he's then tasked with figuring out who did it. And it is a hoot. I just love this book. It is amazing. Next is Blackfish City by Sam J. Miller. I mentioned him in my last video. And this is the first, I think, this is his first adult fiction book. He also does a YA. So this book is a science fiction. It's set on a artificial island city in the throes of not only a housing crisis, but also of a plague that is highly reminiscent of the AIDS virus. And it's about a family coming back together after being separated for decades, and gaining revenge on the people who were responsible for separating the family. So really enjoyed this part. I mean, there are some issues. I have one major issue with one of Miller's choices, and I think the villain is a bit more designated than like an active villain. That you're, yeah, it's sort of, I don't think Miller quite makes his case for the villain being the villain, but yeah. But I mean, overall, besides that, I really did enjoy this book. Next up is a book I haven't read in ages, but when I did read the book, I absolutely loved it. And that is The Sluts by Dennis Cooper. I read this in San Francisco when I briefly lived in San Francisco about 14 years ago. I think I bought this at A Different Light Bookshop on the Castro. And I read it while I was still there. It's a story of a escort who basically spawns a web of wild suppositions from the gay men who have come to adore him. And it is very powerful and interesting. And I definitely do need to give this book a reread. And my number one, my favorite book of the so far of the past 20 years is Radiance by Catherine M. Valenti. I've spoken to this book ad nauseum on this channel. It is the story of Percival, a famous filmmaker whose daughter disappeared during disappeared during a filmmaking expedition to Venus. And he has spent the past decades trying to figure out what happened to her and trying to come to terms with his feelings about her disappearance in the only way he can, which is by making a movie about it and rewriting that movie and rewriting that movie. And this book is just absolutely brilliant. I've read it twice within the past few years, and I've loved it each time. So that is definitely a testament to this book's staying power, at least for me. I just love this book. I cannot recommend it highly enough. So, BookTube, that was my favorite fiction books tag. If you would like to do this tag, please consider yourselves tagged. Remember, there are a few prompts to be aware of. Got to be 10 books. You cannot pick before 2000, so 2000 to 2020. And the list has to refer back to the previous 2 books. Now, obviously, I share nothing with any of either Olive or Steve's lists, but my caveat is a good chunk of these books are science fiction and fantasy, and Uprooted by Naomi Novik is fantasy, and Tigerman by Nick Harkaway is also science fiction or fantasy. So, generically, I'm covered. Or if you want to, the fact that there are several books on both lists that I would like to try may cover me too. So anyway, I will be back in a few minutes, BookTube, with the unpopular opinions tag. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and please stay safe.